Greetings to everybody watching this interview and listening to it. My name is Olga Johnston, and we are interviewing Elizabeth Cline on the platform called Luxiders. It's a sustainable culture platform that is looking at sustainable fashion, sustainable beauty, wellness, food, and lifestyle. And today our conversation will be around sustainable fashion. And Elizabeth is an expert. She has written books about it. She is working as a journalist, and she is also a policy and advocacy director of for Remake. And I have questions for Elizabeth and would like to greet you and start with the question about her journey, her personal journey in sustainability from the books that the first one was written, I think exactly 10 years ago, to the newest book, and also how you became involved with Remake.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Olga. I'm so excited to talk to you today and just share a little bit about my work with Remake and this accountability report we just put out. And you know, I know my background is a bit of a mouthful at this point because I do wear a lot of hats. But yeah, the way that I got into writing about sustainability and labor rights in the fashion industry was truly from my own personal curiosity. I used to be a huge fast fashion shopper. When I first moved to New York City, I was working in media in Midtown, you know, in Manhattan, and I just developed a cheap fashion habit, and I filled my closet up with over 300 items of clothes, and I had no idea where these clothes were made, what they were made out of, what the impacts were that were associated with my fashion. And it was just, you know, kind of, there was an irony there because I've always been really conscious about what I eat, like a lot of other people. And just when it came to my closet, absolutely no reflection. And to your point, it has been 10 years since Overdress came out, and there has just been a sea change in thinking about sustainable and ethical fashion. It's now a global movement, a global phenomenon, and I really can't think of a single large retailer that isn't taking sustainability more seriously than they were in the past.
Interesting. And your first book was really a critique and the description of the difficult situation that we were in, that people were not really aware of. It was even before the Rana Plaza collapse. And in your most recent book, you're also offering, I think, solutions to how to go about creating sustainable closet, if you like. And can you comment a little bit on that, and then tell us about also your parallel work with Remake?
Sure. So my second book, The Conscious Closet, it came out in 2019, and it really is, as it sounds, it's more of a shopping guide. It's much more of a personal book about the everyday choices that we make, getting dressed, buying clothes. And that book, you know, it brings in an audience to this subject from a different direction, because a lot of us start to become aware of the impact the fashion industry has through our shopping carts. You know, you go to make that choice, you get an ad on Instagram, and this company says we're sustainable, or maybe you see someone post something on Instagram and they say this company is not sustainable. So the Conscious Closet is really a, you know, friendly educational guide to the impacts that our clothing has on the planet and how we can begin to shift those impacts. And it covers everything from how to donate your clothing responsibly, you know, the different environmental impacts associated with different materials like cotton, recycled polyester, viscose, which most people don't realize is made out of trees. There's a lot going on. But yeah, the book is really written to be a a kind of one-stop resource guide for people who are new to this subject. And in terms of how I got involved with Remake, it was during the pandemic. I started working with Remake on a campaign called PayUp to get brands to pay their garment workers for clothing that they manufactured right before the pandemic. And it really just evolved from there. I think it was working on the PayUp campaign that made me realize that I wanted to move beyond trying to make change just through the way that I shop, towards really looking at how we can organize collectively to push these companies to do better, and then how we can engage with our elected leaders to change our laws so that companies are forced to do better, to be frank.
Great. So it's really a large platform, a bigger stage, and for a bigger industrial impact nearly. So maybe can you tell us a few words about Remake? Because Remake is a non-profit organization. It is also a platform. It is also a movement for sustainable fashion, for the change in the fashion industry. And it's also a community of people. So with all of these interesting aspects to it, how would you describe Remake to, say, our listeners, to somebody who doesn't know about this organization, because it is based in the US and it's working globally, worldwide, but please describe it to also to those who are not maybe still aware of it.
Well, I think that you just did a beautiful job of describing some of the work that we do. You know, the three main components of Remake's work is one, education. So we work with universities to, you know, talk to people about what ethical and sustainable fashion is and means. We also have a huge ambassador community, which are, you know, citizen activists who are located all around the world. We have ambassadors globally who also do this work of educating their own communities about the fashion industry and how we can make change. We also, we work in the space of transparency. So we put out an annual accountability report that ranks fashion brands on their progress towards social and environmental goals. And then the last piece of the work is what I'm focused on, which is advocacy and policy. So one of the projects that we are most proud of is last year we helped work on a campaign in California to pass a bill called the Garment Worker Protection Act, which is, to my knowledge, the first law in the world that holds fashion brands legally accountable for a wage theft that happens in their factories. So if garment workers are not paid what they're owed, brands are on the hook. And we see that as a really precedent-setting watershed moment in the history of fashion. And we're just really excited to see how it's going to start to change fashion as we move into 2022.
Absolutely. Congratulations on that. It is a breakthrough and it is a great example. And let's talk very briefly maybe about the sustainability, the new report called Fashion Accountability Report, because it's not the first report that is issued by Remake. It rates 60 fashion brands. Also in very maybe simple words, what is it about and how can people use it? Maybe how can consumers use it? And also how can fashion designers and brands use it?
Sure. So the accountability report, it's totally reformulated this year. But to your point, it ranks 60 brands based on their social and environmental performance. It's based on what brands publicly disclose. So it's what you can find. Yes. It has to be what a consumer could find on their website in a sustainability report. And one of the most significant things about the report is we measure brands based on actions, not on promises. So if they say something like, we're promising to reduce our carbon emissions, that doesn't get them any points. They actually have to demonstrate that they're reducing their carbon emissions. And so one of the ways that people can use the report is, one, to just see the spectrum of behavior. There are companies that for the first time scored negatively. That's how poorly they performed. And a lot of that had to do with, brands canceling orders during the pandemic, like Ross Dress for Less, Global Brands Group, TJX, Kohl's. And then you can kind of go all the way up to the brands that did better. So I know one of the main ways that people use this report is as a shopping guide, trying to figure out who to stay away from, companies that are doing a little bit better that you might want to give your money to. But if you're a brand, one of the best things about this report is you can go into the spreadsheet and look at how we're evaluating companies, and it is an extraordinary roadmap to make change. It shows you what should you be working on in your raw materials, like what should you be working on in your governance, how should you be thinking about wages to your factory workers, and all of that is public. So we just make it amazing. Available on the website. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And what was most surprising finding, if you like, for you, or discovery as a result of this report, or while working on this report? What was anything that you can single out, really you didn't expect?
I think that there were a couple things. I mean, one, there's been this kind of rush for companies to use more recycled polyester. That's like one of the things that they're doing to try to prove that they're making progress towards sustainability. And I think it's something that, people are starting to raise questions about, what is the source of all of this recycled polyester? What kinds of unintended impacts is it going to have? But I thought that was interesting, that there was such a growth in that particular material. I also was so interested in the number of companies who have secondhand and resale initiatives now. I am aware of it, but the more we started looking, it was, everyone from Lululemon to Levi's to H&M, like everybody seems to have one of these initiatives. But then on the other hand, these big companies can't actually demonstrate that the secondhand part of their business is leading to a reduction in the part of their business where they're making new clothes. So circularity circularity is becoming just another revenue stream for companies. So it's something that I think
what is damaging.
Right. It's not
the biggest ecological footprint that we're trying to reduce, basically, when we're trying to become sustainable. Interesting. That is very interesting. Mm-hmm. And if we look at the luxury companies, one of the surprises that I found while looking at the report was that Stella McCartney, that is of course very well known for its ethical ethos and all the actions and all the goodness that it does publicly and changing itself and showing it as an example to others, it still rates quite low. It got a rate number 17 points out of 150 possible.
Right.
And I myself looked into it and I saw yes. And now you have already mentioned, because you evaluate companies on the basis of what is open, what is seen publicly. So my question is, did Stella McCartney, did they contact you? Did they see the report? Did they make comments? Did they know how to improve?
Yeah, those are great questions. So to your point, the reason why they scored poorly is because they aren't very transparent. They're just, the data that we were looking for in the report was not in the public domain. And yes, every brand received their score before we published the report. And what a lot of companies did, Burberry, Zara, we heard back from a lot of companies. I think we heard back from Gucci. We always hear back from H&M. Is if we miss
higher, they do score higher than Stella McCartney, Burberry, and Gucci.
Right. So one of the things
out of luxury brands.
Yeah, one of the things those companies did was if we missed something in a report, they would direct our attention to it and say, no, we have put that information in the public domain. And I would I think what'll be interesting to see is if Stella puts more information in the public domain that these reports are looking for, because at this, from our vantage point, there was just no way to tell, right? And that's why it's so important for companies to be clear about what they're doing, because otherwise everything just evolves into greenwashing.
Absolutely.
And consumers are not able to tell what's up from down.
And so, and regarding big luxury brands to compare with smaller companies, what does the report tell us?
So we only evaluated Stella, Burberry, and Gucci from the luxury industry. So I don't want to make too many generalizations about luxury versus the rest of the industry, just because the sample size is not big enough. And we are going to add more luxury companies moving forward. But one thing that we did notice in the report is that there is a pretty vast difference between the way these big conglomerates operate and the small companies that advertise themselves as ethical and sustainable. So these like small brands, like Beja or Mud Jeans, who are some of the other high scorers, even Eileen Fisher, which they're not small, but compared to like an H&M, they are. These Solo, Reformation, those companies tend to be more transparent. They can demonstrate more progress towards environmental and social commitments. But even the small companies performed 4 times higher than the big companies. But all of these brands have a long way to go. That was one of the big takeaways of the report, that the average score was 17 out of 150. So the fashion industry really is at the beginning of a journey towards change.
And at the beginning, it sounds amazing, because there has been work going on for more than a decade, even knowing from your own book that was published, the first one, more than 10 years ago. And still you're saying, it's a long way to go. And we know it's a long way to go. We also know that we do have a time limit on that, on becoming sustainable. So what is your prediction? What is your really either wish or prediction how the sustainability can be achieved in the fashion industry fast enough for us to be not to go over the temperature rises that are supposed to be at a certain degree to a certain time?
Yeah, I mean, climate change, that is the piece of this that has a time-bound, urgent, like, this has to be solved now. And from that perspective, we did start to see that a lot of brands are reporting their emissions, including scope 3. So that's important because it gives us a benchmark. It means that next year we can tell who is and is not actually making progress. We also have seen over the past year, one of our stakeholders from the Apparel Impact Institute have started to put out these reports to show companies exactly where they're going to have to invest their money to decarbonize the industry and do it fast enough in order to keep the planet under 1.5 degrees warming. But reports like the accountability report are crucial to holding the industry to account, because there's always going to be those companies who care about their reputation and are going to move fast enough. But then there's all of these other companies that, quite frankly, fly under the radar, that without public pressure and without communities like Remake are not going to move. And that's why I think the report is such an important tool, because it's really can be used to organize and put heat on companies where it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that's what's going to happen. That report will be used and will become very well known in the fashion industry and also outside. and I mean
Yeah.
consumers, among consumers that can also start using it. And that is fantastically very interesting and very promising conversation we're having in terms of what has been happening already, and because it's so important, and things like this report can be used, things like your books need to be used as well. So to conclude our conversation, what would you recommend consumers, maybe the main 3 things that they can do but when they think about their wardrobe, how to make it more sustainable, how to make it more ethical? What is these 3 most important steps that everybody really can achieve?
Number 1 is consciousness. You know, just start by educating yourself. I mean, obviously my books, I'm going to recommend my books, but there's so many resources out there online. And this all starts with deciding to be informed. I'll speak personally. Since I became involved in the ethical and sustainable fashion movement, I love fashion more than ever. I love clothing more than ever, because really knowing and understanding what you're wearing and the industry that you're participating in, it feels better. Like you feel more connected, right? To your clothes, but also to the world around you. The second tip would be to join a community, join other people. So I'm of course going to plug Remake. Remake makes it so easy for people to take action. So let's say you're not going to, you know, become a full-time activist. We make it easy. You know, there's always opportunities to sign petitions. We provide action kits to write letters to brands. It's just like a one-stop shop for people who want to get more involved. And then my third tip would be that when you start to shift where you're going to change, where you're going to shop, I'm going to say start with trying to find companies who prioritize human rights and paying people fairly. You know, I see people really twist themselves into knots trying to figure out like what material is most sustainable. But we have to start with the basics. Every human being that works in the fashion industry deserves a dignified wage. So do what you can to support brands that really take care of the people in their company first.
I love that. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I love that you bring this to the human level, to the level of values that all and each of us can respond to and can use as the guiding principle for life, for every action that we take. Thank you very much for your interview, and big success to you and to Remake and to all of us in achieving sustainability in fashion, in the industry, and in every aspect of our lives. Thank you very much again for joining us at Luxiders.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a wonderful conversation.